Shalom, thanks for joining me. I'm continuing in Matthew chapter 12 and going to begin in verse 38 and go through verse 45. It's a lot of reading again. This little section is referred to as the sign of Jonah. The sign of Jonah. If you remember the Old Testament story of Jonah, one of the prophets that God said to him, I want you to go and preach in Nineveh. He ran away. He got on a boat to go to Tarshish, which is very likely on the east coast of Spain. He's going the exact opposite direction. God caused a great storm to come up. The boat was almost sinking. Jonah ended up thrown into the water. A great fish swallowed him. He was in the belly of the fish for 3 days, 3 nights, and then the fish vomited him up on the shore. Interestingly enough, at the same location where he left of Israel. So then, instead of disobeying God, he turned around and walked directly to Nineveh and preached the gospel. He didn't preach the gospel, but he preached that repent because judgment is coming. And then, of all things, they repented. And God did not judge them. And Jonah was highly upset about that. And God had to chastise them. He said, I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, Jonah. Not you. I don't do this for your approval. But Jesus is using this story of Jonah being in the belly of the belly of the fish for 3 days. And so watch what Jesus said. Then some of the Pharisees and teachers of the law said to him, Teacher, we want to see a miraculous sign from you. Now, verse 39. He answered, A wicked and adulterous generation asks for a miraculous sign, but none will be given it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. Now, he explains it. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Jesus is right there predicting his crucifixion, his burial, and his resurrection. He's actually predicting the duration of it all. 3 days, 3 nights. That's the sign of Jonah, he says. 3 days. 3 nights. And then he says, verse 41, the men of Nineveh will stand up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it. For they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and now one greater than Jonah is here. By the way, Jesus is referring to himself as one greater than Jonah is here. But it's interesting, he said, that generation of Nineveh, they're actually going to stand up and look at you, and they will be pointing a finger at you because you didn't listen when the truth was preached to you, and those pagan Ninevites did. There's something to think about. Verse 42, the queen of the south will rise at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, for she came from the ends of the earth to listen to Solomon's wisdom, and now one greater than Solomon is here. The queen of the south, also sometimes called the queen of Sheba, she came during the time of King Solomon, and as she approached, by the way, that's in 1 Kings chapter 10, and it's also repeated in 2 Chronicles chapter 9. But she had heard of the great wisdom and the wealth of Solomon, so she came all the way from Sheba to come see him, and she was amazed and astounded. But it's interesting, it says she's going to also rise up in judgment. She wasn't a believer in Yahweh. Just like the Ninevites, she was not a believer. But she came and she saw and she was amazed and she worshiped Yahweh. And Jesus said, even she will stand up and point to all of you who are rejecting me because you're hearing the truth, but you're not believing it. You're rejecting it. You're turning away from it. There is a judgment for you for that. And then he says, one greater than Solomon is here. Jesus is saying, I am the one here who is greater than Solomon. Now, Jesus is speaking about himself as the Messiah. So it's not an egotistical thing. It's not egotistical if it's true. Okay. Verse 43. This is an interesting thing here about an evil spirit. When an evil spirit comes out of a man, it goes through arid places seeking rest and does not find it. Then it says, I will return to the house I left. When it arrives, it finds the house unoccupied, swept clean, and put in order. Then it goes and takes with it 7 other spirits, more wicked than itself, and they go in and live there. And the final condition of that man is worse than the first. That is how it will be with this wicked generation. Now, it's interesting that Jesus then starts talking about demons. He's been driving out demons. So he actually says, explains something this generation is watching him drive out demons. And there's a quote from the NIV Cultural Background Study Bible I want to read. Jesus was driving out demons, but this wicked generation was welcoming them back in. That's an interesting thought, don't you think? And then a quote from the Westminster Study Bible. I want to read this to you. And they label this section as an evil generation becomes more evil. Their last state would become worse than their first state. The exorcism of unclean spirits is but a temporary solution. I think that's interesting. You know, these folks continuously rejecting Jesus preaching the truth to them. And that's what Jesus was talking about earlier as the unforgivable sin. And he may temporarily cast a demon out of them or preach the truth to them temporarily for a while. But because they will keep rejecting it, they will become even more evil, and their last state will be worse than the first. And that's what Jesus is saying in here. The point being is this: don't turn down the gospel. Turn towards the gospel. Accept what Jesus is telling you through his word. And I'm trying to tell you, don't commit the unforgivable sin by continually rejecting him. Thank you.